Lunar phases and delineations. Lunation cycle. The luminaries are the most important celestial bodies in astrology because they rule the day and the night, the year and the month, and every aspect of our life. The sun and the moon are the only wandering stars that are always direct in motion and never move backwards in the order of signs. The sun is visible and more prominent in the day, while the moon is the brightest and strongest celestial body at night. Given the fact that the sun is the main source of light and heating on Earth, and the moon does not shine with own light, but with the light reflected from the sun could be considered superior. However, at night, when the sun is not visible, the management over the terrestrial world is transmitted to the moon, and its role as ruler of providence and fortune is most prominent. The luminaries are regarded as a couple not only in terms of rational and significations, but also in their motion and configuration to each other. The time that the sun needs to reach the same degree in the zodiac equals 1 year or 365 days, 5 hours and 48 minutes, while the time the moon needs to reach the same phase and position relative to the sun and to complete the lunation is 1 month or 29 days, 12 hours and 44 minutes. What we see in the sky. Since the moon's glow comes from the sun, their configuration to each other, as seen from Earth, determines the shape of the visible moon disk. The different stages of the lunation cycle are called phases. This word comes from the ancient Greek phasis and means an appearance. So phases are the different appearances of the moon as seen from Earth. There are two reversive points in the lunation cycle that split it in two. From new moon to full moon, the moon is waxing or increasing in light, and from full moon to new moon, it is waning or decreasing in light. When we add to these the points of half full moon, we receive the four main lunar phases: the new moon, first quarter, full moon, and last quarter. As viewed from Earth, then the moon is at an angle to the sun of 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and 270 degrees, respectively. The intermediate phases are positioned between main phases when the moon's apparent shape is either crescent or gibbous. Each of these phases appears at slightly different times at different locations on Earth. When the moon, as seen from Earth, is a thin crescent, the dark side of the moon appears dimly illuminated. This ashen glow of the otherwise unilluminated portion of the moon is lit by the sunlight reflected from Earth, called earthshine. This phenomenon is best observed after dusk during the crescent phase, described as the old moon in the new moon's arms, and before dawn during the balsamic phase, known as the new moon in the old moon's arms. The observable changes of the moon during its different phases are detailed as follows. New moon phase. The moon conjuncts the sun at 0 degrees. This is the darkest phase of the moon when its disk is completely in sun's shadow, lit only by earthshine. The moon conjuncts the sun and is invisible throughout the entire day and night. They rise, culminate, and set together. From the exact conjunction on, the moon becomes waxing and starts increasing in light. The new moon appears highest on the summer solstice and lowest on the winter solstice. Crescent moon phase. The moon is 45 degrees after the sun in the order of signs. Between 0 and 50% of the right side of the moon is lit by the sun. The moon is visible from late morning to post-dusk. At early afternoon, it reaches its highest position in the sky. First quarter phase. Left square of the moon to the sun at 90 degrees in the order of signs. The sun lights around 50% of the right side of the moon. The moon is visible from noon to midnight. At early evening, it reaches its highest position in the sky. The first quarter moon appears highest on the spring equinox and lowest on the autumn equinox. Gibbous moon phase. The moon is 135 degrees after the sun in the order of signs. Between 50% and 100% of the right side of the moon is lit by the sun. The moon is visible from late afternoon and most of the night. Its highest position in the sky is at late evening, before midnight. Full moon phase. The moon opposes the sun at 180 degrees. This is the brightest phase of the moon when its disk is completely illuminated. The moon is visible through the entire night and reaches its highest position in the sky at midnight. From the exacto position on, the moon becomes waning and starts decreasing in light. The full moon appears highest on the winter solstice and lowest on the summer solstice. Disseminating moon phase. The moon is 135 degrees before the sun, contrary to the order of signs. Between 50% and 100% of the left side of the moon is lit by the sun. The moon is visible for most of the night and early morning. Its highest position in the sky is between midnight and sunrise. Last quarter phase. Right square of the moon to the sun at 90 degrees, contrary to the order of signs. The sun lights around 50% of the left side of the moon. The moon is visible from late night to late morning. At early morning, it reaches its highest position in the sky. The last quarter moon appears highest on the autumn equinox and lowest on the spring equinox. Balsamic moon phase. The moon is 45 degrees before the sun, contrary to the order of signs. Between 0 and 50% of the left side of the moon is lit by the sun. The moon is visible from pre-dawn to early afternoon. It reaches its highest position in the sky in the morning. Delineations of the lunar phases. The moon is believed to be sustaining life with its qualities of moist and hot. These qualities were understood both physically and metaphysically. Hot is warm, light, fast, conducive of action and success, while moist is wet, soft, changeable, inclined to adaptation and acceptance. According to Ptolemy, most of the moon's power consists of humidifying, and its action is to soften and cause putrefaction in living things. It is also moderately heating because of the light reflected from the sun. Since the qualities of the moon depend on the light reflected from the sun, they are slightly modified during the different phases and visibility of the moon's disk. In Book 1 of Tetrabiblos, Ptolemy says that the moon is more productive of moisture from new moon to first quarter, which makes it indicative of a lot of changes, activity and softness. The moon is more productive of heat from first quarter to full moon, which makes it indicative of strength, activity and success, which culminates at full moon. The moon is more productive of dryness from full moon to last quarter, which makes it indicative of less activity and hardness. The moon is more productive of cold from last quarter to occultation, which makes it indicative of less activity and detachment from mundane matters. Some later authors, like Rhetorius the Egyptian and Abu Mashar, believe that the moon is moist and cold, and it can become moderately heating only accidentally. This is possible between first quarter and full moon, or even shortly after it, when the moon is configured to the sun in a way that allows it to appropriate as much sunlight as possible. Thus modified, the moon is more or less beneficial and productive, depending on the time of the day we consider, which is the sect, and what configuration it shares with the sun, which is the phase. In general, the waxing moon functions better during the day and configured with planets from the diurnal sect, like Jupiter and Saturn. At night, the waning moon is more productive, especially when configured with Venus or Mars, as planets from the nocturnal sect. This could be explained with the fact that the waxing moon is hotter and more active, similar with the day, and the waning moon is less active and colder, like the night. It is worth noted that configurations with the sun, especially when the moon is applying to opposition at full moon and squares at first and last quarters are not considered beneficial for the moon. During invisibility, the moon is not productive of results, but most damaging of all is the configuration just before the new moon, when the moon is invisible, weakest, combust within the rays, and applying to the exact degree of the sun. The reasons for this could be found in the fact that the sun is the ruler of the diurnal sect, while the moon is the ruler of the nocturnal sect, and when configured in opposition, square, or conjunction, the magnitude of the sun's influence weakens the moon. These are, after all, the points where the moon changes its phases by the decree of the sun. In traditional astrology, the phases of the moon were delineated in relation to the above principles: the sect at birth, the configuration to other planets, the house where the moon is situated, its overall strength, speed, latitude, co-rising with fixed stars, etc. A very general delineation of the phases is given by Valens in Book 2nd of his Ontology, which could be used only after the influence of the above factors is assessed. The new moon is indicative of rank and power, secrets and hidden things, parents and marriages, royal affairs and public matters concerning cities, religion, as well as of all universal cosmic matters. The first visibility of the moon at about 15 degrees after the sun is indicative of birth, beginning and life, occupation and future wealth. The crescent moon is indicative of nurture and expectations in life, of wives and mothers. The first quarter is indicative of injuries, diseases and violent accidents, but also of children, status, profit, good things to come, appearance and control over matters. The gibbous moon is indicative of prosperity, future success, travel, and the affinity of relatives. The full moon is indicative of contrariety, fame and infamy, travel and violent events, of those who fall from preeminence, as well as those who rise from a humble state, of affinities, passions, political opposition, and the affinity of parents. The beginning of the waning of the light is indicative of the diminishing of resources and occupations, of those who grow humble and lowly, of sudden falls and destruction of matters. The disseminating moon is indicative of travel abroad, of great activities, and of prosperity. The last quarter phase is indicative of old affairs, chronic diseases, spoiling of things, and losing control over matters. The balsamic moon is indicative of a wife's death, of unemployment or robbery. The last visibility of the moon, at about 15 degrees before the sun, is indicative of chains, imprisonment, secrets, condemnation, and infamy. Conclusion. The moon is the fastest and most changeable celestial body, capable to pass through all phases of the lunation cycle within 1 month. Moon's appearances come from the configuration with the sun and are indicative of its quality, depending on the shape and visibility of the moon's disk and the time of the day. The delineations of the moon are heavily modified by the sect of the chart, the phase of the moon, the configuration with other planets, the house position of the moon, and many more factors. Although the waxing moon is strongest when in full moon phase, it is also susceptible to adversities. The phase of gibbous moon is almost as strong, indicative of prosperity and success without adversities. Thus, for diurnal nativities, the crescent and gibbous phases are one of the most favorable configurations, which is further strengthened if the moon is configured with Jupiter or Saturn. The waning moon is strongest in disseminating phase, which is also the most favorable position for nocturnal nativities, when configured with Venus or Mars. These phases are just before or after the full moon, when the moon's disk is mostly lit and without opposition to the sun, or at the beginning of the lunation cycle but after conjunction to the sun and out of its rays.